Okay, what do I think of glyphosate, our government, and our duty as citizens? I will tell you, it covers a lot of ground, but I shall try to cover it under 20 minutes. I learned from scientists that glyphosate, being a mineral chelator, was denying our body from picking up essential nutrients from food by chelating, stealing the minerals. About a third of our proteins, say around 40,000 kinds of proteins, give or take a few, function with a metallic ion placed in them. When our body creates a new protein of this kind, say to replace a damaged one, it needs a metallic ion such as manganese or iron to be attached to them in order for the proteins to function properly. This mineral is to be picked up from our food. However, glyphosate, if present in the same food, is able to steal that mineral. So newly formed proteins would remain non-functional as a result. Non-functional proteins lead to a pathway of diseases. We humans and all animals have evolved in symbiosis with the bacterial kingdom, and a mass of bacteria use our body as host and in return perform essential services such as helping digest our food and assist our immune system. Glyphosate kills bacteria, and thus it indirectly harms all of us if we consume glyphosate along with our food. The claim that glyphosate is safe is patently false, and to make it stick, industry has acquired a stranglehold on scientific research, robbing it of neutrality and objectivity. More on this later. Our immune system has not learned to identify glyphosate as a harmful substance because it is a synthetic molecule that did not exist in nature in the 4 billion year evolutionary history of life on Earth. Our evolutionary process did not have to deal with it. That is why we have no defense against glyphosate. Thus, this molecule was invented by man 2 generations ago, and as such is of an extraterrestrial nature. It ought to be made extraterrestrial again, sending it out of this planet Earth. Let them make it and use it on Jupiter. If all this was not enough, as if all this was not enough, glyphosate is a biological mimic of glycine, a canonical amino acid that is among the most common of the 22 amino acids that form the basic building block of life, of all life. By molecular mimicry, it slips past our defenses and gets misincorporated into our proteins. This invasion of glyphosate into our proteins turns them into rogue proteins, which can lead again to a cascading series of diseases, including synthetic diseases that did not exist before. For scientific confirmation, one may read peer-reviewed papers of Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff, a copy of which is also on my blog, whose heading is tonu.org, tonu.org. For me, glyphosate is unacceptable for a simpler and more ominous reason. A product may not be approved by a government for general release without disclosure of its safety documents and providing the proof that it is safe. However, test data and documents that prove glyphosate is safe for consumers has not been disclosed by any nation anywhere on this planet, despite it being approved for use since 1970s. To me, this itself makes the approval of glyphosate illegal. And no government was engaged in broad-based testing of food to detect the level of concentration of glyphosate, the most used herbicide on this planet. This is not just irresponsible and unacceptable, it should be criminal. Personally, I could not get any organization, any anti-GMO group or various talking heads to join me in asking the government of Canada to disclose hitherto hidden safety documents on glyphosate. Neither could I find anyone to join me asking the Canadian government to start testing our food for glyphosate. In 2013, Canada did not even have a lab that could test glyphosate in food, mainly because neither our government nor the medical establishment had so far been interested in testing foods for glyphosate. As a result, labs did not gear themselves up for a non-existent market. I subsequently started a single-handed two-pronged effort to get the Canadian government at the time under Stephen Harper and the Conservatives to get off its backside and first disclose all safety documents and data based on which it approved the use of glyphosate for the first time back in the 1970s. Then, on a separate appeal, I was to ask the Ministry of Health to get some labs ready to test foods for glyphosate and to answer why Canadians could not test the presence of the most used herbicide in our food. The first effort is still dragging on. The government does agree that I have a right to see the safety documents, and yet it drags its feet forever. I also learned that I was the first person in Canada to officially ask for this information, although the molecule has been approved back in the 1970s. The second effort was more successful. In fact, it moved mountains, primarily due to a dedicated member of parliament, Mr. Alex Aramanenko, who took up my cause and demanded that the then Minister of Health answers my question on why Canadians cannot test food for glyphosate. This resulted in the machinery of the Ministry of Health finally responding to me in a letter and also arranging to have its food inspection agency to start broad-based testing of all foods available in Canada, produced locally and imported, for presence of glyphosate. As soon as I learned that the wheels of the government was finally beginning to turn in favor of testing our food for glyphosate, I asked Canadian government to disclose all test results to me, not just for glyphosate, but for all biocides in food that the government has so far tested. And thus, in December 2016, I got almost 8,000 just concluded test results of glyphosate in foods, and later another almost 100,000 records of results of other biocides in food. Analysis of the glyphosate records proved to be a shocker. First, seed-based foods and food products made in the US and Canada were an order of dimension more toxic with glyphosate than the same foods produced elsewhere on this planet. North America produces the most poisonous foods on earth. I call glyphosate to be poisonous on the grounds that its safety data has been kept hidden. By that omission, I have a right to consider approval of glyphosate as illegal and to consider it as poisonous. Also, that in fact is an extremely dangerous slow poison has been explained by scientists such as Samsel and Senef in their peer-reviewed papers. Not only that, I found that conventional non-GMO crops such as wheat, rye, oats, barley, etc. have an order of dimension more glyphosate in them than genetically modified crops like soy and corn. Conventional non-GMO foods were, in my view, very much more poisonous as a result. In my view, going after Monsanto is a useless exercise because Monsanto does not necessarily break the law. What it does is corrupt our governments and gets our politicians to change the law to suit its business model. I believe its claim of safety of glyphosate to be fraudulent. I believe that is why it influences governments to hide this safety record from the people and prevent independent scrutiny of the records. Our governments is thus knowingly or unknowingly helping slow poisoning of the population by allowing widespread use of glyphosate in agriculture without disclosing its safety. Therefore, if one has to identify the rogues that are spoiling our food, our health and our future, one needs to focus on our ineffective and possibly corrupt political process and perhaps corrupt or illiterate politicians that could not distinguish glyphosate from their elbow, who are unfortunately in charge of the regulatory mechanism and end up changing the laws of the nation to allow glyphosate to be used in agriculture. Other scientists have found problems not just with glyphosate but also with other chemicals packaged around it to make the branded products such as Roundup. While this may be correct, it is glyphosate and glyphosate alone that goes to regulatory mechanism and passes approval that ends up as Roundup. In my view, the cumulative damage that glyphosate does, not just at the toxicological level but in destroying our biology by molecular mimicry, sets this molecule apart from other adjuvants that goes into the packaging. And while we have other herbicides, pesticides, insecticides that are all possibly harmful, harming the ecosystem, glyphosate again stands out by sheer volume of it that is produced and used compared to all other herbicides put together, all other biocides put together. GMO are also based on fraudulent logic and are unwanted. However, there are hundreds and hundreds of them, each following a different sets of scientific detail. If I have to fight a single battle and not 1,000 battles, then I would choose glyphosate to be in my target front and center. Glyphosate is the 900-pound gorilla in our food web and environment. Killing it would effectively also kill the GMO project. We shall be on the way to have all foods grown everywhere to be naturally organic. Agri corporations and their enablers in our government is quick to show the weighty evidence of science papers that claim glyphosate is safe. Promoters of this model of agriculture, peddling increased sale of toxic chemicals, promote a viewpoint that there might be a baseless conspiracy theory and paranoia created in the minds of people by some miscreants and hapless scientists, which is resisting progress and modernism in agriculture and fighting glyphosate. There is a misconception that a little bit of toxicity in food in way of glyphosate is both acceptable and necessary in view of the increased population of the world. All these claims by the promoters of toxic agriculture are fraudulent, but my response to all this conspiracy theory is simple. I say, disclose the safety documents or shut up. As to the weight of scientific evidence and the so-called science-based assessment, this is what I have to say. Science research on safety of technologies such as glyphosate and GMO needs to be public funded and public owned. Instead, it is funded by the industry, and our politicians have allowed this travesty to come about. The public has bought into this on the false idea that this makes science free for the people and reduces our tax burden. This is false. There is no free lunch. You pay junk money for science and you get junk science. The industry is not interested in funding scientists that wish to check if products such as glyphosate has a problem. As a result, research on possible negative effects of glyphosate does not get any funding. Science has thus become one-sided. It has lost its neutrality and objectivity. To me, This is not science. This is voodoo. And the so-called scientists promoting this kind of technology and agriculture are not true scientists. They are peddlers. Lastly, all this talk sidesteps a few important points, and these are to do with my perception of what constitutes democracy, the role of citizenry, and what should be my personal duty to uphold our democratic process, where the people are the masters of the government and not some poison peddling corporation. The most important stakeholder in democracy is the citizen. It is my view that we, each of us, incur a debt to society and to democracy as we grow up. The society does a lot to groom us, and we in turn are to pay this debt back through the course of our lives by doing something in return for our society, our neighborhood, and our nation. We take a lot from the society. We are supposed to put back more than we take so that we leave the kitty a bit richer and not sucked dry in our lifetime. And there is the crux. We as individuals, within our individual capacity, are to engage in citizen activism to uphold and improve the wheels of this nation, of our nation. This is our job and not the job of the politicians. The politician's job is to represent us, take our views, and execute our wishes as our temporary servants. Our job is to be ever vigilant to ensure that these temporary servants are not robbing us and selling us off. If we are caught napping and stop controlling the politicians, then our politics will start being controlled by someone else or something else, which does not have our best interest in mind. Democracy then begins to fail or morphs into forms of dictatorship or fascism or other forms of rogue government. As they say, if you have a nation of sheep, you get a government of wolves. So I appeal to you, the people, to get busy paying your debt to the nation and start holding the feet of your politician to the fire. We are facing an existential crisis. The very well-being of your children and grandchildren depends on you doing your duty in your own lifetime. Nothing else will do. Thank you.